Oh, look at that. See, if I hadn't sat down here, I never would have noticed that a bird had walked by and lost bits of its down feather on a cut branch on this stump. Well, that's definitely not anything risky, but the truth of the matter is that when you gather wild edible plants, there are risks associated with that. There are poisonous plants. There are plants that you shouldn't touch. You don't know if you may have allergies. Well, the reality is that you will not learn everything you need to know from this show. The safe way to partake of the Wild Harvest is to learn from the books, go online and learn, but most importantly, connect with a local expert. They will be passionate about teaching you everything from mushrooms to plants to trees and all the safe ways to enjoy the Wild Harvest. This is Southern Oregon, and it's mid-November, and this is an area that I am very familiar with, which is why I wanted to bring Paul here, so that he could experience it as well. You can know a lot about wild edible plants and traveling in the woods, but you can't know it all. That's where community comes in. So this time around, I'm going to join a friend of mine, Adam LaRue, and be taken to an area where I hope we will find some of the choicest mushrooms you could ever hope to eat on this Wild Harvest.
You know, at first they just kind of look like it might be a pine cone under a bunch of pine duff, but then when you start getting an eye, you can start to kind of feel where they are. Like here's one right here. I feel it. And you brush away the pine needles and you can see this little mushroom growing up.
There it is. There it is.
Now this is not a Matsutake. This one, pull back some of this stuff here.
Look at that.
And here is our first Matsutake of the day.
Beautiful.
Matsutakes, they have this kind of brown stape and they have a partial veil. And the most important defining features to be able to tell this from the deadly poisonous Amanita is you try and crush the stem. It's very, very difficult to break that stem. And it also peels like string cheese. Also, the Amanita has a bulb that it grows out of. It grows out of like what looks like an egg.
All right, well, let's see if we can find a couple more of these then.
All right, let's do it. So this is an area where I found matsus before. And so let's just look around here, see what we can find.
Dog will help.
Here we go.
That's beautiful. All right, so tell me what I'm looking at here again.
Okay, the stape or stem of a Matsutake is about the same width as it comes along, and it tapers at the bottom. And a poisonous lookalike has a bulb at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
And you're gonna notice the cinnamon, kind of a spicy, red hot, dirty socks kind of a smell.
Right, so tell me about the mycelium.
It's a white, powdery looking stuff down there, and that's actually what's producing the mushrooms. The mushrooms are the fruit. Well, you can see the mycelium on the base here.
Can do, yeah.
And so you want to cut it so that you're removing that mycelium, just the base of it, and then you can actually plant this back into the forest, and you find a place where Matsutakes like to grow, like under madrone trees. And you can plant this back, and it'll actually, if it likes it, it'll start to spread, and you'll have propagated your mushrooms, and you have more for future generations.
This is great. That's beautiful. Let's look for some more.
Okay.
going to go meet up with Les. He's just a little bit ahead of me on the trail, and he's going to show me something that I've never seen before. And I can tell you honestly, walking through this forest, there wasn't a single thing that I would identify as edible. Some trees I've never seen before. I don't even know what they are. Aromatically, it's outstanding, kind of the ultimate aromatherapy. But I don't really think there's anything I want to eat as of yet, so I'm sure I'm in for something special.
So we're going to forage right here. One plant. This guy. All right. Do you recognize this at all?
Zero.
Short pod mustard. Okay, and we can utilize it in the same way you use any mustard. And let's try a taste.
It is mustard.
Mustard.
No doubt about it. But compared to what I'm used to, like in the garden, I'll grow them and I'll just harvest the leaves when they're very, very small. Nice and spicy, great for a salad, garnish, that sort of thing. And we've never let them mature to this level.
We have the challenge of the winter season, but we're here in Oregon. We're beside a river, so we have altitude differences we can play with here, whether we're going up higher for something like mushrooms or coming down low to the river and finding various plants that are still green. So get to know the mustard plant and gather selectively and just bring home enough that we think we're going to need for dinner.
It actually finishes quite clean and sweet. Sometimes mustard can be super spicy. I imagine it's depending on the season. I've got some ideas with it already though. It's going to be interesting to see what Les thinks.
Sometimes what happens is I think we get in gathering mode, and we pick and we gather and we dig and we pull, and I get like a pang of guilt later, and I feel like, we didn't really pay a lot of attention to that plant. And that is the case, I believe, for rose hips. I've already worked with rose hips with you, and I know you're familiar with it. But I've not seen you gathering them. I want to see you spend some time gathering rose hips. I want you to gather the hips until it hurts. And then if it starts hurting, you can throw your gloves on. But I really do want you to experience that. So this is, I've done my hip gathering. This is on you. I do have a surprise based on the hips for you later on in the kitchen. Okay?
I'm intrigued. Okay.
All right. It's
so
all
what
you.
you're saying is no pain, no gain.
In this situation, exactly. I want to hear you hurt.
Of course you do. This is very, very difficult to harvest just because the thorns on this rose bush are huge. In the kitchen, what I really love about rose hips is the fact that they have so much color. You can dry them, you can turn them into a jam or a spread. You can make tea, you can make sauce, you can use it as a garnish. I think you could probably even turn it into like a fruit leather. Hey.
Rose hip successful?
Well, have a look. I got a few. I didn't quite get as much as we were talking about, but I can tell you it was a challenge.
And this is the aspect of local foraging, of wild gathering, that I'm really trying to get across. It's one thing to have a chef and to hand you an ingredient and you cook it. It's another thing to say, come on with me, let me show you the pain involved in getting something as simple as rose hips.
Yeah.
It just, obviously it's going to create an appreciation for what's involved here. So I'm glad you did that. Thank you for that. But shall we do the reveal?
Yeah.
All right.
I am very curious. Yeah, let's do this.
3, 2, 1.
Whoa. Okay. Everything changes. I was not expecting a turkey.
Before I even got to the highway to go to the place where I wanted to gather and meet up with a local forager, in the middle of the road is this turkey, just freshly hit. So let me be clear about roadkill. It sounds repulsive, and I think most people think that way. But in truth, there are people all across this country that hope for roadkill. A lot of times a roadkill animal actually has meat that is more tender. And the reason is it hasn't been shot or hit with an arrow, and it's not running away and stressing out in all the stress hormones and tightening up its muscles. It's hit and it's dead. And I thought, okay, new game. Everything's just changed right here. This is now going to be a turkey feast that I'm going to present you. The second part of my journey this morning was meeting with Adam LaRue. He's a local forager. We hit the jackpot. These are, pound for pound, the most expensive mushroom in the world. All of these beauties were just punching through the forest floor. Tomorrow or the next day, we're done. But right now, they're perfect. Last week, I gathered tons of rose hips. I went through the whole process and came up with a nice batch of rose hip syrup for you to use. It's sweet. I had a teaspoon of it. Oh my gosh. It's so awesome. 4 simple ingredients, but bulky and beautiful, and I'm excited to see what you do tomorrow.
Never cooked wild turkey before. Turkey's a tough meat to cook, easily to overcook, easy to undercook. Not that hard to nail, you just have to know what you're doing. I am making a stock out of the bones from the wild turkey. And that stock is going to be the foundation to this dinner. One thing about the technique, I'm never going to boil it. I'm going to bring it all to a simmer and I'm going to let it stand. Essentially steep the flavor out of the bones to make the broth. I want to make sure that the flavor profile starts with some of the ingredients that we have found out foraging. I'm going to use some of the mustard. One of my absolute favorites in the world of fall flavors is spaghetti squash. This stuff is so easy to cook. You take the seeds out, scrape it, put it on a tray with some water, and bake it until it's soft. The aroma off of these mushrooms is insane. If there's that much aroma, there's also that much flavor. And I have to make sure that I don't overdo it when I'm using it in this dish. I've used this mushroom before many times. I know it grills well, I know it boils well, and I know it sautés well. This would be enough to serve probably 2 or 3 services in my restaurant. And I would probably be able to touch 100 people with that flavor profile. Next, I'm gonna get to work on the other ingredients for our dinner. I've got some vegetables that I need to prepare. One of the things I like about rutabaga is the fact that it's spicy. It's sweet, it's pungent. I needed a vegetable that would stand up to the pine mushroom. Next up, celery root. It's gonna give me a foundation that isn't a gluten thickened sauce. It's gonna be a celery root thickened sauce. Les's rosehip syrup is 10 times better than the one that I made. I can't believe how much natural rosehip flavor is in there. Rosehips is one of those things that to me is quite unique. I've heard it being compared to that of apple when it's really intense.
All right, beautiful. I can tell these are the Matsutakes.
I wanted first off just to enjoy them as is. Maybe there's going to be a hint of smoke from the fire, but I don't think it's going to be too much. Those things literally cooked in seconds.
Not to challenge where you're sitting with this, but I've been given advice, for example, that the longer you cook a Matsutake, the more tender it becomes. And the less you cook it, it stays rubber. So let's see.
Yeah.
Let's test that theory?
Let's do it.
Wow. So I would agree. It's not melts in your mouth tender. It's not falling. It's not mushing between my teeth. But I like it this way because it's got some body to it.
There is smoke. It's not invasive. You can taste the mushroom. The salt is just about the right balance.
What kind of salt is it?
Kosher salt.
The concept of salts being so different is a little bit of a new world to me. So, but this is kind of cool when you've got a medium like a Matsutake mushroom to play around with the different flavorings you've done here. So this is a great opener, absolutely. I mean, what we're doing right now is celebrating the mushroom itself, right? But this was delicious, thank you.
I have an idea, and I'm gonna make it here over the fire while the fire is hot. Mushrooms on toast. Okay. Super simple ingredient-wise. Okay. I've got the mushrooms. I left them big so they have a chance to kind of braise in the cream. The butter and the shallot are gonna help sweeten the mushrooms up a little bit. I have salt, I have bread for toasting, and I've got the mustard greens.
Oh, right, okay.
Butter. Now that the butter's melted, I'm adding the shallots. And I'm gonna let that cream boil and reduce. If you're making a sauce, 10% cream doesn't work. It will separate when you cook with it, especially if you add acid. The more fat, the more emulsified, the more stable. Okay, that's about perfect. All right, time to eat, Les.
Okay.
This one, eat whatever way you want to, Les. This could almost be done with your hands.
So we've got Matsutake, we've got the short pod mustard, the wild mustard, and then you've added to that, of course, the toast, cream, salt.
And shallot, shallot, however you want to say it.
Wow. That's all I'm going to say.
These mushrooms are, they're wonderful. They're tender, they're juicy. They have, to me, almost like a scallop-like texture to them.
Simple, but really flavorful. This is phenomenal. When you first go out there to pick a mushroom, this is probably not what anybody envisions. But when we put together our strengths, this is exactly what we get. We are not going to find this in a restaurant later on today. It's here now, and we're together. So thank you for this.
The technique that I used for the stock really worked well in the sense that I can taste all of the ingredients that I put into it. Super important. I don't want muddled flavors. This big mushroom has such a huge stem, I can't resist but using it like a noodle. So I'm gonna cook these mushrooms until they just start to get a little bit of caramelization, a little bit of that brown color. Time for the squash. And the last thing for this dish are some spicy sesame seeds. Oh. And what I did is I cut the mushroom stem so it would be kind of strings or
That's what I'm looking at. Okay. Wow, I never would have thought of turning the mushroom into the julienne format. This is terrific.
It's there.
Okay. This is good. This is really good, Paul. The texture, I don't feel like I'm eating pasta. I don't feel like I'm eating noodles in some kind of broth, which would be very boring. Instead, yeah, you've created a delicate texture, I think, now. This is nice. This is lovely. So here's what I get. I start, it's bird. If I get too many of the sesame seeds, they take over. But if I get just the right amount of those, then the mushrooms take over the second I bite into them. So I start with bird and I land on the earth. That's delicious. Cheers.
Cheers. So I've had this turkey soaking in brine, just a sugar salt brine, since this morning. And now I'm going to dry it off. I'm going to roast it. A roasty potato is the perfect starch for the main course. Everything I'm doing in this next dish is to tell the story of the terroir, where the turkey lives. Using some of this wonderful bounty that I have of the pine mushroom, and I'm gonna make it part of the roasty experience. Now it's time to make the sauce. The pan that I cooked the turkey breasts in, some beautiful local Chenin Blanc, wild turkey stock. Look at that color. So I'm taking the last of the mustard greens that I have and a little bit of the extra celery root. That way I'm getting all of the foraged items in one place at one time, which I am super excited about.
Well, I know I'm looking at wild turkey, but I have no idea what else you've done, so.
You know what? I'm saying nothing.
Oh, you want
I
to do it
just
that
want
way?
you to eat. There's a lot going on.
Oh, Paul, that's the best turkey I've ever had. Wow.
So the rutabaga have been glazed with butter and your rosehip syrup. And it worked so well.
First of all, Paul, I had such an enjoyable time making the rosehip syrup. I mean, it was just fun. You know, I went out and did my gathering. I got my fingers covered in the little spiny hairs that are annoying, and I came back in and I used modern pieces of equipment so that it was efficient and expedient. And I boiled the rosehips. Then I added the sugar, and that's the rosehip syrup that I then gave to you. All of the leftover hips and the mush that normally we just throw it in the compost, I kept it, and then I dehydrated it. I dried it, and made just lovely, delicate rosehip tea. I have a feeling that this tea will be cleansing to our palate in between the bites of this. You know, actually, rather, it's a somewhat rich dish. This, it is. It's the best turkey I've ever tasted.
The flavor is not one of those things that it's foreign at all. It is just a really solid turkey flavor.
It would be easy to say, ooh, roadkill, that's repugnant and repulsive. Ooh, no. If you could get away from the squeamishness of it all, you end up with this, you know, a beautiful meal. You have completely nailed this dish. You recall I asked you to save me the bottoms of the stems of the Matsutake mushrooms.
I do.
Those will grow again into new mushrooms if we plant them. So when we're finished here, we're going to go out there, and the final step is we're going to give back by planting. I think we've got about 8 or 9 of those big mushrooms, and we're going to plant those in and around my yard at the base of madrone trees, oak trees. This will do perfectly. You can call it tradition, you can call it spirituality, you can call it whatever you like. In the end, it's just nice to do. But in this case, there's actually a payoff. So place that in there, cover it over with the duff, feed it, in other words, and leave that. It is likely that that will grow, the mycelium will spread, and at some point I'll be looking up here and a beautiful Matsutake mushroom will be punching up through here, just waving, just saying hello. And so I'd love for you to join me in this little tradition here and take a couple of these. Maybe head over about 30 feet that way, you see another madrone. There's a bit of challenge to what we enjoyed. Let's face it, it was roadkill. And also mushrooms, and mushrooms can scare people. But with a little bit of humility, you can get past that. You can get past the squeamishness of a roadkill delight, and you can get past the fear factor of something that might be dangerous and even deadly, such as a mushroom. Well, in the mushroom's case, I did the smart thing, and I went out with Adam LaRue. He knew what he was talking about. The key is humility when it comes to enjoying the wild harvest.